During a routine patrol in the far north, Arctic Ranger Ethan Walker was making his way through the frozen wilderness when a sharp, desperate cry stopped him in his tracks. The cold that morning felt sharper than usual, and the wind kicked up the snow so thick it was hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Still, Ethan pressed toward the sound, eventually reaching a natural ice bridge stretched across a partially frozen river. What he saw there made his heart sink. A small polar bear cub lay inside a deep pit, barely moving, already weakened by the freezing temperatures and sheer exhaustion. Even through the falling snow, Ethan could see the pit wasn't natural. Its walls had clearly been altered, smoothed and steepened by human hands. The ice bore the marks of tools, and fresh claw scratches showed just how hard the cub had tried to escape. A thin glaze of water had frozen at the edges, turning the rim dangerously slick. Drops of blood dotted the surface near the top. The cub had injured itself in its desperate attempts to climb out. Ethan's eyes scanned the area, and a few feet away he spotted the mother bear. She was caught in a heavy steel net, one paw pinned painfully by thick cables. Her every attempt to pull free only worsened the injury. Her gaze never left her cub, watching helplessly, straining toward the pit. The trap had been professionally set. The metal cords were fixed tightly to a large block of ice, frozen deep into the earth. Every movement pulled the cables tighter. The cold was getting worse. Ethan glanced at the small thermometer on his watch and saw the temperature had dropped even more. Snow was beginning to settle on the cub's back, forming a thin crust over its already icy fur. Its movements were slower now. The cries that had first reached Ethan's ears were fading, growing fainter by the minute. He knew he had to act quickly, and that the cub came first. It wouldn't survive much longer in that state. From his pack, Ethan pulled out his climbing gear, a heavy-duty rope, a few carabiners, and compact pulleys to rig a hoist. Even with his heated gloves, the cold had begun to creep into his fingers. He worked quickly, securing one end of the rope to a large, frozen chunk of ice nearby. Every moment counted now. The cub's window for survival was closing. Ethan tried tossing the loop down to the cub. His first attempt missed. The rope was stiff and hard to manage in the cold. The second time, it brushed the cub's side but slipped off. The little bear stirred weakly, reacting to the touch. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying his hands for a third try. Then he heard it, a distant rumble, faint at first, but growing louder. Snowmobiles. The poachers were coming back. He moved faster. On his third attempt, the loop landed just right and held. Gently, carefully, Ethan began lifting the cub. He made sure it stayed clear of any sharp ice edges, trying not to jolt it. The sound of engines was getting closer now, and voices started to carry through the wind. The men were laughing, unaware of what they were walking into. With one last pull, the cub reached the top. It was covered in frost, barely breathing. Ethan knelt beside it, checking for injuries. There were several small cuts, but nothing major. Hypothermia, though, was a serious threat. He pulled out a thermal blanket, wrapping it snugly around the tiny body. The cub didn't struggle. Its eyes, half shut with exhaustion, met Ethan's for a moment. Quiet, trusting. Ethan carefully tucked the cub behind a large snowbank, keeping it hidden and protected from the wind. Then he rushed back to the mother bear. The lock on the trap was more complicated than he'd hoped. The poachers had used a special kind of mechanism to keep people from opening it easily. His fingers were stiff now, shaking as he reached for his multi-tool. But something unexpected happened. The mother bear, instead of panicking, went still. She watched him closely but didn't fight. Her breath hung in the air in slow white clouds. The blood around her injured paw had started to freeze. And the snowmobiles? Now they were close. Ethan could clearly hear the voices now, men joking about their catch. Time was almost up. Ethan bent closer and focused on the lock, trying to keep his hands steady. It wasn't just about freeing a bear anymore. It was about stopping something far worse from happening. Every wrong move risked tightening the grip on the mother bear's wounded paw. Ethan worked carefully, relying on everything he knew about traps like this. Despite the biting cold and rising pressure, his hands moved with steady precision. After a few tense minutes, he heard a faint click. The first part of the lock was disabled. One mechanism down. 2 more to go. But time was slipping away. Then, through the swirling snow, 3 men suddenly appeared. The poachers were back. All of them were armed. The one in front, tall with a gray beard, stopped short when he saw the empty pit. His face darkened. He spotted the fresh tracks. Another man broke away, heading directly for the trapped mother bear. Ethan stayed low, using the bear's massive frame for cover as he continued working. His fingers moved on their own, finding the next switch in the lock. Another quiet click. Just one layer remained. The hardest one. Suddenly, one of the poachers pointed. "Hey, someone's over there!" he shouted. The man raised his weapon and started forward. Ethan didn't hesitate. His numb fingers found the final piece of the mechanism. Quick pause before we continue. If you're enjoying the story, please take a second to like the video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thank you so much. A gust of wind whipped through, lifting a curtain of snow that blinded the poachers for just a moment. That was all Ethan needed. The final part of the lock released with a snap, and the chain clattered to the ground. The mother bear rose, tall and imposing. Covered in snow, she looked like a living mountain. Her deep eyes burned with rage as she stared at the intruders. For a moment, the poachers were frozen in place. Then chaos broke out. Ethan didn't wait. While they scrambled, he slipped away into the storm. Behind him, he heard the bear's roar echo through the icy forest, and the panicked shouts of the men as they scattered. He hurried back to the snowbank where the cub was hidden. He knew the mother would find her baby by scent. From a distance, Ethan watched her appear from the storm, find her cub, and gently lift it in her jaws. Then, without a sound, she carried it away toward the deeper parts of the reserve, places untouched and safe for winter. But the trouble wasn't over. The next 2 months kept Ethan on edge. He noticed unfamiliar snowmobile tracks in remote corners of the reserve, like someone was shadowing his patrols. They hadn't forgotten. On one bitterly cold morning, Ethan found more signs: fresh tracks, crushed snow, even cigarette butts. Someone had been there recently. He reached for his camera to document everything, unaware that eyes were already watching him. Then it happened. A sudden pop shattered the silence. Not quite a gunshot, but enough to send adrenaline flooding his system. Ethan dropped behind a snow-covered spruce. He knew what this was. Blanks? They were trying to scare him, force him to move. It worked. Before he could reposition, 4 men stepped out from behind the trees, weapons up. They weren't amateurs. They moved in formation, silent, precise. Ethan's eyes locked with the leader, the same gray-bearded man from before. The man's smirk was ice cold. "Still playing hero, huh?" he said, his voice full of mockery. With one sharp gesture, the others closed in. Ethan's hand moved toward his radio, his last chance, but a sudden blow to the back of his head sent him crashing into the snow. He gasped, the cold biting his face as rough hands yanked him over. Strong cords were pulled tight around his wrists. The rope burned against his skin. These men knew exactly what they were doing. They had done this before. One of the men knelt down and began rifling through Ethan's backpack, flinging items into the snow without a second thought. Tools, a first aid kit, his compass, everything scattered across the icy ground. His radio landed with a dull thud in a nearby snowbank. His phone followed, swallowed instantly by a fresh layer of soft powder. The gray-bearded man pulled out a folded map, worn thin at the creases. He pointed sharply at a spot on it. "There," he snapped, not bothering to explain. Then he shoved Ethan hard, forcing him to start walking. They marched for what felt like forever, nearly an hour through punishing wind and rising snow. Every step became harder, as the snow deepened and the icy gusts tore through even the thickest layers. Frost clung to their clothing and lashes. The wind howled louder, the beginnings of a blizzard closing in around them. Ethan's boots crunched underfoot, but the sound was quickly swallowed by the storm. The cold sank into his bones, draining his strength. With each passing minute, his hope thinned. This part of the reserve was far off any regular path. Out here, especially in weather like this, no one would just happen to come by. The realization chilled him even more than the wind. These men had picked their ground too well. It was remote, quiet, and forgotten. Then something shifted. One of the poachers up ahead froze mid-step. His back straightened and his face went pale. He glanced around quickly, clearly rattled. The others noticed and stopped too, sensing something wasn't right. Everyone fell silent, their ears straining past the wind. Then it came again, deep, low, and unlike anything else in the storm. A slow, rolling growl that seemed to come from the earth itself. Through the blowing snow, a large white shape took form. Silent, steady, massive. It moved with eerie calm, each step quiet despite its size. The snow barely shifted beneath its heavy paws. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. That scar curved and faded across her front paw. It was her, the mother bear, the same one he had freed weeks ago when she'd been wounded and trapped. Now she was strong, steady, and standing just feet away, her breath steaming in the cold. "Don't move," the leader whispered, barely able to get the words out as he raised his rifle. But the bear had already moved. She stepped directly between Ethan and the poachers, planting herself there like a shield. Her eyes locked on them, steady and fierce. She didn't growl again. She didn't have to. Her body alone said everything. The poachers hesitated. Fear rippled through the group. Slowly, their weapons lowered, not by choice, but by instinct. No one wanted to provoke what stood in front of them. The tension was heavy, like the snow pressing on every branch. The bear growled once more. Low. Final. She dipped her head slightly, her muscles tight, a quiet warning pulsing through every line of her body. She wasn't attacking. She didn't need to. Her message was clear. Ethan was under her protection. One of the men cracked. His hands shook as he reached for his weapon in a blind panic. That was all it took. The bear's roar tore through the storm like a thunderclap. Her fury filled the trees and bounced off the ice. She surged forward a step, and it was like watching a glacier come alive. Her size, her power, it overwhelmed them. Teeth bared, breath steaming, eyes blazing. "Let's go," the leader shouted, his voice suddenly shrill with panic. He stumbled backward. The rest didn't wait. They ran. Tripping, slipping, scrambling through the snow, they fled into the whiteout. Training, weapons, pride, it all vanished beneath their fear. As they vanished into the storm, they dropped everything. Rifles, packs, gear, all of it left behind, forgotten in the snow. The bear didn't chase them. She didn't have to. She stood her ground, still and alert, watching the last of the poachers disappear into the swirling snow. Her breath rose in thick clouds, and her ears twitched at each distant sound, making sure the danger was really gone. Only once everything was quiet again did she slowly turn and look down at Ethan, who was still lying there, hands tied, half buried in the snow. That same bond, formed months earlier when he'd freed her from that brutal trap, was still there. Strong, unspoken, real. As she stepped closer, Ethan tensed up. His heart pounded. No matter how much he trusted her, it was still overwhelming to be face to face with a full-grown polar bear. She stopped just a few steps away. Her breath was warm in the freezing air. Then she lowered her massive head and gently sniffed at the ropes around his wrists. Ethan froze. Her nose touched the bindings, then her powerful jaws came down slowly. Carefully, so carefully, it was hard to believe she began biting through the thick rope. Her teeth, built for crushing ice and bone, moved with almost surgical precision. Bit by bit, the rope began to fray. Then finally, snap. The last strand broke. Ethan's hands were free. The bear stepped back a little, still watching him. She didn't leave right away. It felt like she was waiting for him to get up, to be sure he was steady and out of harm's way. Ethan sat up, then pushed himself to his feet, his body stiff and sore, but still strong. His wrists were red and raw, but the damage wasn't serious. He looked at her and whispered, "Thank you." She tilted her head slightly, not in a human way, but enough to make him feel like she somehow understood. And in that quiet, snow-covered clearing, something passed between them. A connection that couldn't be explained. A wild animal and a man, each of them had saved the other. Ethan stood still, soaking in the moment. This bear hadn't just remembered him. She had risked herself to protect him. That meant something deeper than instinct. After a moment, the bear finally turned. Without a sound, she began to walk away, her large body blending into the white landscape. No roar, no rush, just the soft crunch of snow under her feet. Ethan watched until she disappeared into the storm, leaving only her tracks behind, and a story he'd never forget. What happened that day changed Ethan for good. In one of the harshest places on Earth, he had seen something he never thought possible. A wild predator had shown memory, loyalty, even something like compassion. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Do you believe animals remember kindness? If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Because sometimes kindness does come back right when you need it most. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.